Kids are turning to AI chatbots not just for homework, but for actual friendship, emotional support. Is this innovation or is it a real crisis of loneliness? Robot empires are making their all-star game debut. Is this the end of your blind ump or the start of soulless baseball? Weird Al Yankovic is finally headlining in Madison Square Garden at the age of 65. Accordions, stormtroopers, and all. It's a polka powered pop perfection. Next, we're going to look at Trump's push to fire or nudge out the Fed chair, Jerome Powell. Could it backfire badly? Think about 35% inflation. We'll explain why later in the show. And also, Donald Trump can't stop talking about Epstein, trying to tell other people, don't talk about Epstein. This is a communications disaster, certainly turning into one. I'll be looking at it not through the typical political lens, but from a crisis communications perspective. All that and more today on the CommUniverse. Welcome, I'm TJ Walker. This is your daily dive into top business, technology, and culture stories looked at through the lens of communication. All in the aim of benefiting your personal development to make you more successful. That's what we're about. So I'm TJ Walker. I have been coaching, training leaders, CEOs, Wall Street wizards, billionaires, fund managers, plus political leaders all over the world for decades. Now I'm kind of turning the tables and showing you what's really going on behind the scenes when it comes to people communicating, trying to communicate you and change public opinion. That's what we're all about. Let's go now to segment one. The kids are turning to AI, artificial intelligence, for friendship. A new United Kingdom report reveals that AI chatbots are becoming more than just a digital tool for kids. They're becoming friends. 64% of children now use chatbots for homework, advice, and get this emotional support. Even more troubling, 15% say they prefer talking to a chatbot over a real person. That is concerning. The report is called Me, Myself, and AI. It shows 1 in 4 vulnerable children turning to AI because they feel they have no one else. Popular platforms like ChatGPT, which, full disclosure, helps me write some of the scripts right here for the CommUniverse, Snapchat's My AI, and Character AI are being used without consistent age safeguards or emotional safety checks. Lawmakers like Senator Steve Padilla in California are pushing for protections, but parents and schools remain behind. This isn't just about innovation, it's about silent emotional crisis happening inside every smartphone. AI isn't replacing real relationships by accident, it's filling a vacuum adults left behind. So this is a troubling story and societal condition. According to this report, 64% of children in the United Kingdom use AI chatbots for not just help and advice, but also social bonding, or one of those three. 15% prefer the bots over real humans. And uh, this is not good. And I say this as someone who's a big fan of artificial intelligence, a big fan of interactive artificial intelligence and clones. I have my own clone at tjwalker.ai. You'll be hearing ads for that from time to time right here on this show. But it has to be used in a focused way. Because let's face it, I'm lazy, you're lazy, all human beings are lazy. If we can just sit in bed all day, not shower, not clean up, not do anything, eat jelly donuts, never have to talk to a real human being, and kind of get all the nourishment we want and all the social interaction we want, unfortunately, a lot of us are going to follow up on that offer. And that is increasingly the offer that artificial intelligence is presenting. What does this really mean? If you are someone of any age and you find yourself talking to AI more than a real human being, it's time to say, maybe I've got a problem. Now, I'm all in favor of using artificial intelligence to make your job more effective and to even plan out vacations and things like that. But to make it your primary form of interacting your ideas with the world and not making that human, that is a problem. Human connection is important. In fact, it's why I'm right here today. I'm on location. I'm in the Poconos in Pennsylvania with a little family reunion. There's aunts and uncles here and grandparents for my daughter here. We're all having a good time. Could we just talk on FaceTime? Sure, we could. Could we just get together on Zoom? Could we just email pictures back and forth all the time? Well, we do some of that, but nothing beats face-to-face conversation. As soon as this is done, I'm going to go back into the living room and the kitchen and sit down and actually talk to people. Now, if you're a parent, you, at the moment at least, are a partial dictator. You can have total control over your child if they're below a certain age. You do not have to give them a cell phone, an iPad, a computer, and say, you now have access to every horrible, creepy idea and person in the world. You don't have to do it. But TJ, all my kids' friends have full access to the internet. If I take my kid's phone away, I'll be a pariah. My kid will hate me. No, they won't. Or if they do, too bad. Your job is to parent your child. My job is to parent my daughter. And I can tell you, I did have to cave a little through various other pressures in the family. My daughter does have access to a cell phone, but before you think I'm too big of a hypocrite, she can text friends, call friends, text family, call family. She does not have any access to social media, even to this show, but she can watch it live too. She does not have access to apps that give her any kind of creepy interactive AI interface, encouraging her to starve to death or cut herself or all the other horrible things that a lot of AI will do. So, am I trying to preach a message that let's all become Luddites and let's not use technology and let's lock your child in a vault till age 30? No, that's not the message at all. But there has to be a proper use for AI. A steak knife is great if you're cutting steak. If you're angry at someone and you're trying to jab their body and force them to bleed to death and kill them, it's not a healthy use. And if you are injecting your body, not with knife wounds, but with nonstop artificial zeros and ones that have been turned into things that seem like words, that seem like human emotion, if that's what you're injecting into your body, into your eyes, into your brain all day long, whether it's for you or you've got a real problem. Now, I can't mandate laws in your country or my country saying, hey, parents, you're guilty of child abuse if you give unfettered access to the internet to your child and the ability for them to interact with chatbots all day long, sitting in their room, not talking to human beings. I can't force anyone to convict you of child abuse, but I do think it's abusive. And left to their own devices, in fact, left to my own devices sometimes, it would be easy to just sit all day long, stare at this, stare at a screen and be in your own little bubble and just go and find people who already agree with you, who already tell you what you want. It would be easy, but ultimately it is sucking the marrow out of your, whether you want to call it your brain, your soul, your heart, whatever it is, the things that make us absolutely human. So I think we're all going to have to monitor it carefully. Hello, I'm TJ Walker. This is the CommUniverse. Thanks so much for joining me today. We have a lot of fun going on here. I'm having fun. I'm on vacation, but part of my idea of fun on vacation is doing things I want, and I love spending an hour a day talking about the top news, technology, and culture stories of the day. So I'm very happy to be with you here today, looking at the top stories and analyzing them through a communication lens. If you're seeing this anywhere and you like it, do a thumbs up or leave a comment, sign up for notifications, whatever platform you're on. A little background, we're still in kind of a slow, soft launch. This is a stealth launch for a new show that I will be launching September 2nd, 2025. It'll be a daily show, a little more produced, a little more intro music, and some bells and whistles. It will be distributed on all audio and video podcast platforms and all major social media platforms. So a lot's coming up. It's very exciting. And I hope to do this no matter where I am in the world, whether I'm in my home base, whether I'm on vacation, whether I'm traveling for work. Today, I'm in the Poconos. I believe I'm in Pennsylvania with family. It's a beautiful, gorgeous day. Just had a nice walk down the street. And at the end of my street are ski trails for the winter. Now they're great hiking trails. So that's where I'm going with my daughter and my family. And I'm not taking my cell phone. I want to completely disengage from the world of interactivity, of AI, and all things digital, and just commune with nature. I think you can see it's a beautiful day. It is 77 degrees now. It was 69 when I woke up. So a lot of fun to be had here. Let's hop now over into the second story of the day. My visibility is a little harder here in bright sunshine. I may have to think twice about doing shows outside, but it seems like such a beautiful day. And I thought you might like to see the trees and fun, so I decided to do that. In story two, robot umpires make their All-Star Game debut. The future of baseball is here. At the 2025 Major League Baseball All-Star Game, robot umpires, also known as the automated ball strike system, are calling pitches for the first time on a national stage. Each team gets 2 challenges per game, retaining them if successful. The strike zone is customized to the batter's height, top at 53%, bottom at 27%. Now, this is a big shift from the traditional cube defined in the Major League rulebook. Players on this issue are divided. Some pitchers like the consistency. Others say it removes the human drama. Joe Torre, the former manager of the New York Yankees, and someone who won a number of World Series, supports the system, calling it an overdue update in an era of replay and data-driven precision. Sports training tests show catchers won 56% of appeals. Now, the real test is public trust. Will fans embrace accuracy or miss the chaos of a blown call? So, again, each team can challenge a couple of times a day. The height is very sort of scientifically measured, and they're trying to reduce the human error element of this. I have to tell you, there's a lot of people getting upset over, 3 million truck drivers and cab drivers in America losing their jobs potentially to artificial intelligence. I am not going to cry if umpires lose their jobs because of artificial intelligence. To me, this seems like the perfect textbook example of why using a technology solution is better than a human solution. The umpire's job is to measure in a very calculated way a ball that's being thrown more than 100 miles an hour and making a judgment in just an instantaneous moment, whether it's 1 inch on this side or 1 inch on that side. Now, that is inherently an extraordinarily difficult job for an umpire to do because there are essentially millions of pieces of data that need to be analyzed in the human brain in a millisecond. That's precisely the sort of thing that computers are good for. And I'm not a baseball fan, full disclosure. You may be a baseball fan. I'm not, but I am a fan of the concept of one part of our culture being decided by facts, by data that all people can agree upon is the fairest data we have available. And In my mind, in the current political environment in the United States, so many things going on in science and technology and the academic world, sports is one of the few things where there seems to be agreement from most people, most of the time, that it is a true meritocracy, that the best team does win. It's not simply the scorekeepers were paid off to say that another team scored more points. We haven't really gotten to that point. Yes, I understand in the Olympics, certainly back in the height of the Cold War, there was a sense that the Soviet judges were unfair to Americans and the American judges were unfair to the Soviet. I get that. But beyond those rare occurrences, most people in the world, I think, have more faith in the fairness and accuracy of scores and who gets to win and lose in sports than they do in politics and a lot of other aspects of culture. I'd like to strengthen that. I think as a society, we need more institutions where there is an agreement on a fair process to determine winners and losers. And there's just been too many cases, not only in baseball, I don't mean to pick on baseball umpires versus referees in any other sport, where maybe things are fair 99% of the time throughout a season. But there's that moment in the playoffs or the tournament or a championship when there's one key decision and every single fair-minded observer says the umpire got it wrong, and that wrong decision determined not only the outcome of that game, but the whole championship, the whole season. That has happened numerous times. And I'll leave it to others far more well-versed in sports than I am to articulate the numerous examples of that. But I don't think any serious person can deny human error. And we all make errors. I make errors. I probably made mistakes today, but there's no NFL or Major League Baseball championship at stake. There's no World Series at stake if I make a mistake. And to the extent that artificial intelligence and computers and robots can call the balls and strikes fairly, I just think it makes it a lot better for the game. This is different from saying, okay, we're not going to use a real baseball player. We're going to get a robot that's been programmed through artificial intelligence that's 1,000 times faster, 1,000 times stronger, is guaranteed to hit a home run on every single pitch. At that point, then I think we have a real problem of AI going too far, of robotics, of technology going too far. If we just have two robots playing with each other, against each other, at that point, I think you can make the case, well, why bother? What are we even doing here? So my message, if you make your living as an umpire, it's time to radically shift to plan B. We all have to shift to plan B at certain points of our life, unless we just are on this narrow track of I'm going to be a surgeon and every day from the age of 18, I'm going to study the right things and do the right internships, or I'm going to be a judge. There are still a few career paths where 100% focus from age 18 or even high school earlier, all the way to the end in one field can occasionally work, but that is increasingly rare because new jobs are created all the time. New technologies create new jobs, and people don't like to talk about it. New technologies destroy jobs. And there's a constant change back and forth. When I started my career, I didn't have the ability to make online public speaking and media training courses. It evolved. I had to listen to the technology. These days, it's not as common for corporations to pick up the phone and call me and say, TJ, fly on out to Cleveland, spend 3 days training all of our top 200 executives on how to give more effective speeches or interviews. That part of my business has gone down. But because I had my ear to the ground, listening to technology, the fact that this part went down, the rise of online courses went up. And fortunately, I now have 12 million online enrollments in my courses. So the fact that the big company in Cleveland isn't calling for 3 days, doesn't matter. It's been a net positive for me. Now, technological change is not a net positive for everyone. I don't want to spin it as everyone is always better off. That's never, well, my iPad fell down. That's never been the way with any technology in the world where everyone instantly benefits equally. There are winners and losers. The implicit promise with technological advance in society is that overall the pie expands and overall it's better for the society as a whole. And because things are better, the people who've been harmed, who've lost, can be helped by those doing better through the form of retraining or more of a social safety net. That's the implicit message. It doesn't always work that way, but that's the theory. What we don't know is, will artificial intelligence change that? Will we get to the point where it's only helping the top 0.01% and everyone else is unemployed and we've got a bizarre Hunger Games situation? I don't know. I'm not making that prediction. But the history of technology has been pretty good, even though it's also caused misery and harm and losses. The net, as far as economic impact, growth on jobs in general, has been up. So I'm not one of these who said, oh, we can't take away the jobs from the umpires. If you're telling yourself it's wrong, it's morally wrong to take away these jobs from umpires and give it to robots and artificial intelligence and automated systems for calling balls and strikes, you then have to say we should hire the 400,000 women who were telephone operators in the United States in 1960. And instead of being able to call anyone in the world for essentially pennies or no extra charge once you pay a flat rate fee, you want to go back to the days of every phone call costing you about $50 if it wasn't someone in your hometown. I don't know about you. I don't want to go back to those days. So you've got to be intellectually honest and consistent. You can't say umpires deserve their jobs to be saved. Telephone operators didn't deserve to have their jobs saved. What happened to all those telephone operators? They found other jobs as administrative assistants, secretaries, as they were called back in the 1960s. And overall, the economy just expanded and expanded and expanded, certainly throughout the 60s, when technology got rid of that need for telephone operators. So again, I'm not a huge fan of baseball. I would love to hear from you. If you are a fan of baseball and you have strong feelings about that, feel free to share them with us right here. You can post comments on wherever you are watching this show. Let's go to the third news story today. Weird Al has his rock star moment at the age of 65. Weird Al Yankovic. He's the parody king of pop. He just had his biggest moment yet, a sold-out show at Madison Square Garden, kicking off with a polka remix of Old Town Road. He launched into decades of satire. Eat It, from Michael Jackson's Beat It, Like a Surgeon instead of Madonna's Like a Virgin, Smells Like Nirvana, and more, backed by a tight band and a crowd singing every word. At 65, he still delivers high. He's older than I am, so it's good to see people like that out filling Madison Square Garden. He's delivering the high kicks. He's got Hawaiian shirts, accordion-fueled anthems. Fans even saw him arrive on stage via a scooter for White and Nerdy and close with a Star Wars finale featuring stormtroopers and R2-D2. Here's the thing. You can laugh at Weird Al Yankovic all you want. He's sold more than 12 million albums throughout his career. That's a lot of albums. And he's won 5 Grammys and had a #1 album as recently as 2014. Somehow his popularity is peaking again, powered by parody, the originality of his parody, and sheer joy. 4 decades of comedy, and I guess call it comedy music, and he's essentially being recognized as the rock star he always wanted to be. Now, he's covered everything from Paul Simon's You Can Call Me Al to a lot of Michael Jackson songs. I'm not a huge fan of Weird Al. What I am a huge fan of is anybody who can make a career being a little bit different and being a creator. So on that, I am a huge Al Yankovic fan. I personally think it's kind of a one-act pony for me. You know, listening to a parody song, if I hear it once and get a chuckle or two, okay. I would never in a million years buy a whole parody album. But that's the beauty of this world we in. You don't have to appeal to me. There's no one person you have to appeal to be successful. And you do not have to appeal to everyone. Weird Al Yankovic is not everyone's cup of tea. He's okay with that. But what I love is decade after decade after decade, he churns out new material, parodies of other well-known songs. He tours. He does media interviews. He promotes. And he doesn't get bothered by the fact that people aren't saying, oh, wow, I love Al's original music where he's just doing his own stuff. Now, for all I know, Weird Al does his own stuff, maybe even does it under another name. But he's not troubled by the fact that he is this hybrid. He's a musician. He's a comedian. He is a parody expert. He's crafted his own path in life as a creator. And he did this well before social media and internet video made it so much easier to do things like these spoofs. I mean, he's been around since the old days. You wanted to make a video that had the same production qualities of Michael Jackson's Thriller, you had to raise a fortune of money yourself and do production the old-fashioned way. You couldn't just push a few buttons on a computer, have AI make you look like you're in Michael Jackson's Thriller. So what we know about him, he's a savvy businessman. He had to, in order to get enough people to trust him, record labels to back him. This is before the days where anyone can just load up something to Spotify and YouTube and things take off. He had to go through the old-fashioned system of gatekeepers. And he's come out the other end performing in Madison Square Garden. So it's hard for me to imagine. Someone had said to me 40 years ago, hey, TJ, here's a way you can be rich and famous. We want you to sing songs that are parodies of famous people and dress up like them and do silly little wordplay. I think my reaction would have been, what? Okay, maybe it gets played on the radio once, but how do you make money from that? Who would ever go to a concert? That would have been my reaction. And you know what? I would have been completely wrong. I'm often wrong. You know who else is wrong? You are, quite often. Especially when you're second guessing things you might want to try. You might experiment. Now, I'm not asking you to give up your job as a CEO of a major company and a big paycheck to start doing parody videos. This isn't about doing parody videos. What it's about is the idea of trying new things, blending different art forms, blending your own skills to do something a little bit different that either can help people, whether it's in the form of a new business, a book, an online course, or entertain people, as Weird Al has done. Well, for decade after decade after decade. So experiment with that. That's really my message to you as it relates to your career. Switching gears, let's look at broader economic issues. Major economist warns that Trump's Fed pressure could backfire. Economist Rebecca Patterson warns that Trump's campaign to fire Fed Chair Jerome Powell could backfire badly. In a New York Times op-ed this week, she argues that firing Powell or nudging him aside might make U.S. inflation spiral like it did in Turkey, where inflation has gone up 85%. It might spiral the way it has in Hungary, where it's gone up some 35% after their central banks were politicized. Now, Trump wants lower interest rates to stimulate the economy and reduce borrowing costs. Well, every president wants that. But undermining the Fed's independence could have the opposite effect, driving up long term interest rates, weakening the dollar, and spooking global investors. Now, even if Trump appoints a new Fed chair, they'd still need a majority vote from the 12 governors around the country. And that's far from certain. The bottom line, using the Fed as a political tool might be legal, but it's economically reckless. And I say it might be legal. According to many scholars, it is not. That the president is supposed to respect that Fed chairs have terms. Once they're in, they're not fired unless they're caught doing something egregiously illegal. And to just come in and change that, we see what happens when other countries do it. It destroys their economy. Short term, it might feel good to the leader to be able to control the whole economy, but long term, there are severe repercussions. Again, things to remember here, Trump is pressuring the Fed to cut rates and fire Jerome Powell. If the rates go down, yeah, it's easier for people to buy homes. It's easier for the economy to grow and things go faster. But there is a reason why rates are not always low. It can lead to massive, massive inflation, and that can destroy an economy. Economists warn that changing the Fed chair and someone who just does whatever Trump wants and gives, or whatever any president wants, it's not specific to Trump other than he's the guy trying to change what was an agreement among both parties in America for the last 80 years. The problem is it could trigger inflation similar to what's happening in Turkey, where same thing. Someone came to office, popularly elected, said, this election stuff's good when I get in, but now let me kind of stop that and control the whole game. Let's be an authoritarian. It's happened in Turkey. It's happened in Hungary. And in Turkey, the inflation rate, 35%. Now, here in the United States, inflation got up to 7, 8, 9%. People thought it was the end of the world. People were screaming bloody murder. Imagine 35% inflation versus 9%. And to look further back and to our friends down south in Argentina, they would love to have 35% inflation. They're used to things like 85, 100, 200, 300% inflation because they just lower interest rates and make it easy and have no respect for the integrity of their own federal banking system. The central bank interference in Hungary led to junk credit ratings for that country. Currently, it's important to remember the Fed chair may require Senate confirmation, and there are legal battles about the idea if Trump were to just try to kick out Jerome Powell and install a new henchman or a toady to do whatever he wants. Market confidence would likely drop. This makes interest rates go up, which is essentially a huge tax increase for everyone. And that is the big problem. So what message is really being sent here? What I think the message coming from the White House is 100% on track with everything else Trump has done with his life. He's always been about short-term gain. What appeals to me in the moment? I want to buy the Plaza Hotel because it's cool. Yeah, I'll buy it and then sell it and lose a bunch of money. I want to buy casinos because then I can hold myself out as a big casino guy and be cool, but lose lots of money and have daddy bail me out. We'll worry about that later. I want to buy a football team. Let's buy a USFL football team. Oh, doesn't work. No one wants to come see these games. Let's walk away from it. And apologies if this offends anyone, but just stating well-documented facts. Trump says, oh, I want to sleep with a porn star. Who cares about tomorrow if my wife, my young child finds out? Let's do it now today because it feels good today. It would, in fact, feel good today to see interest rates go much lower. All sorts of development would grow, short-term revenues would grow. But what happens 18 months later, 2 months later, when confidence is destroyed in the American financial system, inflation is rampant, nobody wants to buy our bonds, our treasuries, and invest in America anymore. So this is a message that's consistent with anyone who's actually followed Trump's sense of business and how the world works. He's always about short-term benefit. That's why, if you look at the analysis from Bloomberg and the New York Times in 2016, Donald Trump was one of the worst, if not the worst, businessman in the entire world. He had the biggest tax deduction for losses of anyone. And his worth, he had increased his worth $0 over what his net worth would have been if he had just taken his daddy's inheritance and put it in an S&P 500 index fund. People don't like to admit that. They say, oh, he's a businessman. How could you question a businessman? He's a billionaire. Well, I could go down the phone book, pull any 100 names out and say, hey, I'm going to give you $40 million when you're 5 years old. Put it in an index fund and you'll never have to work and you'll end up a billionaire. Does it sound like a good idea? Will you take that deal? They would all say yes. And every one of them would be a billionaire if they just didn't touch the money or they lived off a few $100,000 a year until they became a billionaire. So it's a misreading of history, facts, science, and logic to suggest that Donald Trump is a businessman, with one exception. He's in the business of being a TV personality who is a tough business guy. On that, he's great. And certainly for the last near decade, he's been great at playing the role of a politician who wants to act like a tough businessman, making things happen. But he doesn't, by all indications, seem to have any indication of what generates long-term wealth for anyone other than himself. Because if you talk to most people who've loaned him money or invested in him, talk to any of the investors in his casinos, they lost a fortune, while Trump paid himself a very nice part-time CEO fee. So we're going to be monitoring what's happening with the Fed and the political machinations going on there, because the latest has been trying to gin up a phony excuse, a phony scandal, saying that Jerome Powell is guilty of corruptly spending money redecorating the Fed. If you believe that, I definitely have a bridge to sell you. It's a complete smokescreen and complete utter nonsense. Final story of the day, and this is a story that doesn't want to go away. It's not a story I enjoy talking about. It's a story where I've made some predictions, and it turns out right now I'm wrong. And believe me, I'm very happy that I'm wrong. It's a story that I believe is a distraction from serious things, but at some point, a story gets so big, it sucks up all the energy in the room and in the internet and every place else. So you have to talk about it. I'm talking, of course, about Jeffrey Epstein and the files, or the client files, or the missing files, because it's tearing apart the MAGA world, the Trump supporters, the Trump administration. It is absolutely the number one obsession among so many people who were, some of them are, but were the dominant supporters of President Trump this past election, his first election, and throughout. So here's the problem. Donald Trump can't seem to stop talking about Jeffrey Epstein, and he's making it worse. Now, Trump is typically a master of changing subjects. You want to talk about something he's bad done here, he'll be like, let's invade Greenland. No one's talking about this issue over here. Someone wants to talk about all these convictions here. It's like, oh, I slept with a porn star. More interesting things here. So he, in many respects, is a true media genius in his ability to control the narrative, to get attention on what he wants to talk about, because he's really good at either attacking someone or doing something so outrageous that everyone's jaw drops and they have to talk about it. It's not working this time with respect to the Jeffrey Epstein situation. So he's posted things that imply, I have nothing to do with Epstein. Ask Clinton and Prince Andrew. He's saying, why are you still talking about that? It's not a story anymore. Well, here's the rule with the media. And again, Trump, I do give credit where credit's due. He is a great master of the media. But when you are the subject of a scandal, which he is here, when you are the subject of controversy and when people talk about it, it's hurting you, the worst thing you could possibly do is say, don't talk about it anymore. That makes people say, oh, he doesn't want to talk about it. Let's talk about it more. That's why I always advise CEOs I work with, politicians, presidents of other countries. I do not work with any U.S. president. That's why I always advise them, never say to a reporter, that's not a good question, or I don't want to answer that question, or that's not the real issue here. Anytime you tell a reporter, or for that matter, your supporters, that's not an issue worth discussing. I really want to talk about this over here. You've already screwed up because you've made people think, oh, what's he hiding here? Oh, we hit a soft spot. We hit a nerve. Must be hiding something here. Must be something interesting and juicy here. And Trump normally, to his credit, doesn't fall for this. He doesn't spend time telling reporters what not to talk about. He simply talks about what he wants to talk about, and he packages it in a way that is so interesting that he essentially forces reporters to go into a whole new subject area. It seems like he's been trying that in the last few weeks, whether it's bombing, starting wars, talking about things egregiously unconstitutional, like stripping away the U.S. citizenship of a famous critic of his, talk show host Rosie O'Donnell, who currently lives in Ireland. Many of these seem like his typical playbook to change the subject. Unfortunately for him, Trump grew up politically in this marinated stew of conspiracy theories. His whole rise to power essentially came from promoting the conspiracy theory that Barack Obama was not a United States citizen, was not born in the United States, was born in Kenya, and was therefore an illegitimate president. So he's been in this whole stew of conspiracies for so long, he's part and parcel of it. It's very hard to leave an environment that you've been in your whole life and start to thrive in a new fact-based world. It's very rare to see fish that have been living in water their whole life just walk out on land and start saying, oh, pay no attention to that water over here. I don't need it. No, you don't see that. And that is essentially what Donald Trump is trying to do regarding this Epstein issue. And I got to tell you, as someone who, as you've no doubt noticed, if you watch this, not a huge fan of this administration. So watching him twist and squirm and do these configurations, it's kind of funny and pathetic at the same time. He's saying, why would you even want to look at the Epstein file? It was written by crooked Hillary. Well, Jeffrey Epstein died. He officially killed himself in 2019. And Hillary Clinton last held any position of importance when she was Secretary of State, which ended when Trump was elected president in 2016. So Hillary Clinton was in no position whatsoever to write any report on Jeffrey Epstein. So it's one thing to spin. It's one thing to concoct an alternative universe, but usually there's got to be a tiny thread, a tiny shred of some kind of evidence, flimsy as it could be, but to say, oh, why are you talking to me? Talk to Hillary Clinton. Well, first of all, the Trump administration was in power when Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. Let's not forget that. Now, Trump and his cronies control the federal government now. In fact, his Attorney General said, I've got the Epstein files on my desk, and I'm going to be releasing them. Now it's like, oh, there's no files. There's no client files. Okay, there might not be, but you can't have it both ways. You can't tease and tantalize, make all the conspiracy theorists salivate, and then say, no, it's not there. I lied about that before. And then essentially lie and say, oh, I never lied. At some point, even for your biggest fans are going to say, this is too far. Now, I went on record last week saying I thought most of the Trump supporters would simply say, okay, if there's a report out and Trump's in it, and it turns out he was a client of Jeffrey Epstein, and it turns out documents that Jeffrey Epstein set up Trump with 1,000 13-year-olds to spend the night with him. My prediction then was the MAGA universe would simply say, oh, okay, at least he's honest, and far better than all the liberals who like Romeo and Juliet, because that was about a 13. I just thought they would instantly say, okay, since he did it and he's our dear leader, it's okay. Now let's change the subject. But it appears as though I'm wrong. It appears as though they're not letting this go. And it's a bit awkward and embarrassing when reporters are asking the president of the United States, is your own deputy secretary, or your own deputy director of the FBI even still working for you, Dan Bongino? And he's like, I think so. That's kind of his response. I talked to him. He's a good guy. When you can't even say if your own staff is still working for you because they think you're lying so much about being involved in a pedophile ring, that's trouble. So I may have misjudged last week. It may be that there is a line. Having an affair with a pornographer, a porn star, no problem. Getting convicted of 51 felonies, no problem. Having a judge say by any other name, but what people commonly think of as rape, you were guilty of regarding Eugene Carroll, no problem. His fans have washed away every kind of numerous bankruptcies, trashing ex-wives, tossing women to the curb. No problem. That was always no problem for all of his supporters. So I'm frankly surprised to see this being a problem. A part of the issue, some analysts have theorized, well, you've got the whole QAnon conspiracy crowd who are convinced that the whole world is run by this elite group of evil people. For some reason, somehow all liberal Democrats and people in charge of major institutions like the New York Times, and they're all pedophiles. This is why we had the Pizzagate scandal, where a guy so convinced of this went to a Pizza Hut in Washington, D.C., or a pizza parlor with a gun saying, take me to the basement where I can kill all the pedophiles. Well, there was no basement, and it was all nonsense. If that's the kindergarten version of conspiracy fools, now we've gone up to sort of the high school version of conspiracy theorists who believe this Jeffrey Epstein thing is all about how prominent Democrats are pedophiles. Now, the odd thing, I don't quite want to say funny thing since we're talking about, the sexual molestation of children, but the bizarre thing is if you had to pick one politician who has the most evidence of being actively involved with Jeffrey Epstein and young girls, and the number one politician who has the biggest motive to keep things quiet, it's obviously Donald Trump. Here's a guy that Epstein himself said, Donald Trump's been my best friend for 15 years. If you scan the entire internet looking for every picture of Donald Trump smiling or laughing, you'll never find images, videos, and pictures of Donald Trump looking happier than with Jeffrey Epstein. And when you look at some of the young women involved, one who eventually killed herself, where did she meet Jeffrey Epstein? She met him at Mar-a-Lago. There's countless pictures of Trump with Epstein. and with Giselle Maxwell, or Ghislaine Maxwell. And the ties are like this. Beyond that, Trump is on record as saying, hey, Epstein's a great guy. We both have so much in common. We both like, it said he likes beautiful young women as much as I do, especially on the younger side. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Seemed cute, I guess, to Trump at the time. But you don't see quotes like that from Bill Gates. Bill Gates is not on record of saying he liked Jeffrey Epstein because they both like beautiful women on the young side. Does that mean everyone else is innocent? No, that's not my suggestion. But if you're going to be an effective deliverer of messages, at some point you do have to have some kind of a logical thread occasionally. And there's simply no logic to this whatsoever. Trump is on record as saying he likes this guy because this guy likes to hang out with young, beautiful women. It is an established record that some of these, at least one of these underage girls, met Epstein through a connection at Mar-a-Lago. It's essentially ground zero of Epstein's crime scene. And it is bizarre to me that all of these, and now obviously Trump's president of the United States, so all of the information by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, by all legal officials, law enforcement officials in the United States, is under his control. So if you were looking for motive for some politician to bury a report, there's never in the history of the world going to be a more compelling case for this one person to want to hide something. Now, I say all this and that I'm one of the few honest people, I think, online. I'll tell you right up front. I have no idea if there's a client file, if Trump is in it. We know he's in files that relate to Jeffrey Epstein because there are official records of things like flight records. And Trump is officially in the records of having flown with Epstein more than half a dozen times in numerous meetings. So we know at some level he's in a file about Jeffrey Epstein. What we don't know is he listed as a client? I mean, I think there's a perfectly solid case to suggest that Jeffrey Epstein didn't have any clients, that he had a couple of really rich guys, maybe even just one, the guy who owned Victoria's Secrets, and he made so much money from that guy. He spent all of the rest of his time just spending money and paying off young girls and partying, and he liked to talk to interesting, smart people. So I don't know if he had actual clients in the sense of pay or extortion or quid pro quos, or if he just was a sick person. We know he's a sick person who liked to have sex with underage girls, and maybe he just liked to surround them and share what he thought was his bounty with his friends, and there was no client relationship. Again, I have no idea. I'm being honest with you. I'm not simply going to speculate the worst possible scenario because someone has a different party or philosophy than mine. That is relatively rare. And not that I'm so virtuous, but in the world of online communication and punditry, that's not as common. The far more common thing is to say, here's somebody I don't like. Here's something we don't know. Here's something where there's a little confusion. Therefore, let me add everything together, 2 + 2 + 2, and it's -69, and this person is the worst criminal ever. That's the more normal equation. And that's not the game I'm going to play here. The game here is we look at the top stories of the day that relate to business, technology, and culture, analyze it through the lens of communication skills to come up with ways of helping you become more successful. That's what we're about. I'm TJ Walker. Thanks so much for joining me today. I will see you tomorrow.